Dienstag, Mittwoch, Donnerstag, Freitag, Samstag, Sonntag. Ich spreche dir die anderen auch nochmal an.
Ja.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Montag, Dienstag, Mittwoch. Bitte? Soll ich hier nochmal ran? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Montag. Bitte? Also das sind ausgeknallt.
So we only sent you the people that showed up. There's no point putting them in.
I'm not even criticizing. I just process. Okay, so you write the exact announcements that has to be made. Okay.
I'll do that.
And then always give a copy of that to the back so Ellen could then scroll it on. that was that.
I mean, basically, I see.
Solutions are off. No, what I need is a cover.
I don't want to start with a half a house. Is that what you want me to do?
Okay, folks, please, if we can take a seat and settle down. Thank you very much for your cooperation. We do realize that the logistics of moving from one place to the other does make us lose some time, but we are in a good place to be able to start right now. So we do thank you for rushing back here so that we could get going. We are now in a listening session, And in this listening session, we received the report of the General Secretary. And so it is my pleasure and privilege to invite the Reverend Dr. Chris Ferguson to share his report with us at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. President, and greetings and thank everybody for making the special effort to come back and as we begin to focus now on the WCRC and the report of the General Secretary, I just want to begin by giving thanks to the God of life, because the WCRC on its many levels, I'm pleased to report, is embracing the call for renewal, the call that is embodied in our General Council theme, Living God, Renew and Transform Us. Thanks to the faithfulness, the prayer, hard work, and dedication of the officers, the Executive Committee, staff, regional councils, member churches, we are, despite all considerable challenges both in the past and in the present, moving forward with renewed vigor. The call to renewal and transformation has inspired us. We are clearly struggling, as Romans invites us to do, not to conform, but to turn around and renew ourselves for our mission. And as we begin this reflection, one thing that has been clear throughout this General Council and throughout our lives is that we are so aware that our entire world, people and planet, are in a crisis that engulfs our life together in all its dimensions. We continue to see the inequity, the systemic racism, war, poverty, and violence that are deeply rooted in and driven by inherently unjust, ecologically destructive economic and financial systems that work against life abundant. We come to this place embracing a vision for renewal and transformation from the very depths of our being. The psalmist reminds us that we cry out from the depths. The prophetic tradition reminds us to be clear about our no's. So we begin all things with prayer, turning to God. And in the prayer and confession, God then turns us back to the world to call us to reject all systems, ideologies, regimes, idols that impose domination, division, destruction, despair, suffering, and death, everything that endangers God's creation. But we also come from the place of being deeply touched by the vitality and joy that our churches and members share as they witness to life and to the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We have seen the writing on the wall. We are grasping the true global dimensions of the crisis, and from that deep place, we know that we need to come together as a family of churches to embrace together that reality that we face. I want to say that I have made the commitment, of course, to write a full and comprehensive report, which you have before you. And the accountability section of the General Secretary bringing before this General Council the activities and accomplishments and lifting up all that we have done in the last 7 years is found in two places. One, in the report called From Grand Rapids to Leipzig. You have received this report, and I commend you to study it. You'll find, among other things in this report, financial information, complete readout of the major decisions that have been taken, and reporting about them. So I will not repeat in any detail the accountability items that are found in that report. Similarly, my full report here goes into depth about issues that have happened over the last 7 years. And I will not rehearse those now, but rather will speak to the report rather than read it out to you, something for which I'm sure you're very thankful. The thing that I see we need to do, therefore, is to look in 3 moments. One is the journey from Grand Rapids to Leipzig, and in that to focus in the situation of transition, and then to focus again on the last 2.5 years, which I have more to say about, having been the time when my own term of office began. That first moment of the past journey then brings us to the second, where we reflect in my report on our three contexts, or 3 frames in which we understand our gathering here. The frame, first of all, of the long sweep of our history, the more than 500 years of the Reformation movements and moments. Then shifting into our context, our life together as a communion, our 7 years of being koinonia with each other. The third context is the context of a world fallen among thieves, where life is threatened. And I will end my report by lifting up challenges and a vision for what it seems that is required of the communion if we embrace fully this prayer for renewal and transformation. I want to begin, of course, by thanking, in the past perspective, as one who has inherited a rich tradition of hard work. The President has already done it, but again, I would like to, the lights are down, so I can't see where he's sitting, but the Reverend Dr. Setri Naomi, whose face we see on the screen. I cannot be strong enough in my praise and appreciation. We continue to see every day the fruits of his hard work in what we are doing, and at the same time, a special word is due because Reverend Dr. Naomi has accompanied me so well to have a smooth and almost seamless transition. I have in my report expressed strong words, and I want to reiterate them again, that came to me so forcefully yesterday in his presentation, the visionary leadership of Reverend Dr. Jerry Pillai. The friendship is added to that as a special note of how he has accompanied me and supported me, and the team that we have made together so that we could offer leadership together, Jerry. I am so grateful to you. And we have had also in with the special thanks to all the officers, to say that we started out with the General Treasurer in the person of Gottfried Lacher, and appreciate and honor his service. After a period of time, Dr. Johann Weissman became our General Secretary, and we have already heard great tributes to his incredible efforts, not only in the fundraising and support of this General Council meeting, but very much as the General Treasurer, helping move. A theme you will hear is how we moved from an organization in deep financial crisis to a place of relative stability, and we give great thanks to you, Johann, for your leadership. I think for people who are not familiar with the history, it is important to focus it in a simple way. The Uniting General Council met in Grand Rapids. 2 organizations came together, and we really did articulate a very bold and strong vision. Understanding communion and unity as a gift, we said we are called to communion, and we are committed to justice. We immediately set to have, I wasn't there, but part of the tradition has been brought to me, a very firm, under the leadership of Jerry and Setri Naomi, a strategic plan that said how to make this vision real. But then a hard reality set in, and we have to name it frankly and to be clear about where we're at. That the organization found itself with its offices in one of the most expensive cities of the world. That the fundraising for programs wasn't in a bad space, but what was true was that the core budget, supported mostly by the membership donations, was not sufficient even to hire one of the key staff positions. With the high salary costs and living costs in Geneva, the organization found itself with depleted reserves and in a financial crisis. That crisis was met by I would say again, the bold and definitive leadership of the officers and the full executive committee who rose to the challenge. And they took the decision that in order to move forward, they needed to move out of Geneva, a very painful and wrenching decision, and find a place to operate that would allow the resources of WCRC to be used in a way that we're able to move forward, but understand that we did not have the capacity to continue in Geneva. When that decision was made, the decision then, after a deep period of discernment, was made the move to Hanover. I think everybody has tracked that that from the time the financial decision was upon it, a great deal of work was done when the crisis was evident, and then the move to Hanover happened in the beginning of 2014. What is clear in terms of the move is moving us towards a situation of being able to carry out our mission and have relative stability. This is to be lifted up and celebrated, but to be clear that the first thing that was aware is that any such move has a great impact on an organization. First of all, the energy that otherwise would have gone into the visioning and the moving forward was instead in dealing directly with the crisis. And then once the choice to move was in place, although you will see in this report much ongoing activity, in spite of excellent programs and continuing life and witness, there was at the same time a redirection of energies. Then the move itself had more transition and turmoil attached to it, greatly impacted in many ways the staff. It impacted the financial and administrative systems. So the good news of being able to deal creatively with a crisis is met with years of change and distraction from the core vision. Not that nothing was done, but not the bold vision that had been outlined. The good news, as we say, is that now, starting in 2014, there was a series of other challenges in Hanover, still impacting staff, still needing to get systems up and running, but we had incredible support. That support included the generous and extremely ambitious desire to collaborate from the churches in Germany. I must say, not only our member churches and the Reformed Alliance, but also the United Churches in Germany, and offering a great deal of support and help. The Council for World Mission came through with not only great encouragement and partnership, but also with donation of £1 million that served to create a stable situation for the reserve fund and the capital base that allowed us to move from a sense of sinking to a sense of moving forward. On top of that, we were able to embrace firmly and fully, I think, a sense of confidence in ourselves. So I want to give special acknowledgement to Dr. Colin Cowan and the Council of World Mission for a partnership that has helped us move forward. The UEK, which is the United Churches in Germany, also made financially as well as in other ways contributions to our stability. So here's the picture: a move, great change, another change comes, the change in leadership. Moving now, as Dr. Naomi finishes his 14 years of service with 2 terms, search for a new General Secretary. That was a protracted process, and when that was done, there was then a need to establish in Hanover the offices, database systems, financial systems, staff stability. All of that needed some time and work. And now the next move was really to put us in a place where we could say, we're clear that we're going to survive, now we can begin to thrive, brings us really only to last year, 2016, in the executive meeting in Havana, Cuba. A sense that a corner had been turned and we were moving beyond the immediate, and that it was a crisis. And we took a look again then at that strategic plan, at the bold vision. And I think the President outlined very well yesterday, thank you, Mr. President, the plan was built around 5 key directions, and the revised strategic plan said, we have a General Council coming up. In all things, we must make sure that this General Council is successful in setting the tone for the next number of years, the 7 years coming. But at the same time, there were important goals from the last General Council we must carry out. So we said we will take this 1 year and in each of the strategic areas, pick the 1 or 2 or 3 things that must be done to move us forward in our call to communion and our commitment to justice. But we will do it in such a way that will ensure that everything we're doing in our program and witness contributes to the General Council, and that the General Council itself contributes to the fulfillment of our strategic plan. And we hope that you will see that that is so. Some of the things that have been lifted up, but I will lift them up briefly, is from last year to this year, we realized that we needed to do 2 things that started really in 2014, that where we can use the word movement. There was a sensation that we had moved away. When we moved away from Geneva, we had actually moved away from the ecumenical movement. So many of our activities were the reconnecting with our ecumenical partners. The second part of our movement was some of our churches in the global south were perplexed, not that we moved from Geneva, but that we moved to another spot in Europe and wondered, were we moving away from the very heart and soul of where the vast majority of our churches live? So again, connecting and reconnecting with our member churches. We have picked up key themes in the area of mission and have decided we will continue to move forward and strongly. And the plans are outlined, and you will read them in my speech, but to be sure to address mission themes, and we will hear much more about that. But in this last year and a half, 2 years, we made a great effort to come up with methodologies and reach out to churches in the Middle East, in Nigeria and other places where the whole relationship between religion and violence and doing mission in a situation of tension and conflict is needing our special attention and theological reflection. The President yesterday has also talked, when we come to the theme of communion, we had a consultation on communion in 2014, and it shows that today, as a communion of churches, as a koinonia, we have a long way to go, and there are specific issues that are threatening our unity and our communion. One of them that was mentioned is the theme of human sexuality. And to expand just briefly on what the President said yesterday, we understand that we must be committed as a world community of Reformed churches to acknowledging in our midst the theme, the issue of human sexuality, broadly understood, is dividing us. Part of the issue is we don't all understand communion in the same way. Some of us feel we can be members of this larger family, but say if another church takes a position on human sexuality that we don't agree with, we can distance ourselves from that one member, but still be part of the whole. For us, this is impossible. We have a vision that these issues should not be church-dividing issues. We do not have a position on human sexuality, but I want to emphasize it's not because we're trying to avoid the conversation or scared of the division. We are already being divided. We understand now in this moment our need is to have a communion conversation. What is the nature of our communion? How do we together recognize that in our communion there are differences, and the richness of our tradition and putting the scriptures at the center give us tremendous help in seeing that we can maintain our unity, lift up justice, continue to witness to our core beliefs, and not be divided. And so we have plans and progress to create the space for this to happen. So that will be in communion. In justice, we are moving ahead, as you will see very strongly, and have been very pleased to say that we had a program coming out of Grand Rapids about a new international and financial economic architecture, looking at the systems and structures that maintain the current unjust economic system. And we were going to partner with others in moving forward. And that partnership hasn't been as easy as we thought, and we're extremely pleased that our new strategic moment is that we have been able to accomplish some things with World Council of Churches, CWM, Lutheran World Federation, to work in a concerted way for economic transformation. And you will be hearing much more about that. Also, of course, the reality of gender justice work is not limited to, but is included and embraced the whole question that the President spoke of yesterday around the ordination of women, and we will bend into that. But one of our goals in this particular meeting was to assure that the goal set in Grand Rapids to have a meeting 50-50 men and women, full parity, full acknowledgement of all the ministries of the baptized in this court or this church, council would be met, and we have come a long way. You will see when we're talking about constitutional changes that we were tripped up by a stipulation in the Constitution that has some of the delegations having even odd numbers. They can have 3, 5, or 7 delegates, but our Constitution says, and those delegations will be gender balanced. So on the one hand, a 50-50 rule. On the other hand, you can have 3 people. We will fix that if this is the will of this group. The other point on that, the theology themes have been very, very rich. Ongoing ecumenical dialogues, and you'll read those in the report. And out of the dialogues, challenges to us to go farther and do more. One of those is the whole theme of the JDDJ, which you will understand that was a priority, the Joint Declaration on the Doctrine of Justification. And in that work, we have been challenged to move forward. The 2010 Uniting General Council called us to have a consultation within our group to consider the possibility of associating with the Joint Declaration. After a process of consultation, the Executive Committee decided in May of 2016 to joyfully accept the invitation to associate with the JDDJ and to emphasize the connection between justification and justice, as mentioned yesterday, as our Reformed contribution to the ecumenical understanding. This is a strong and important adding of a Reformed voice and commitment to the document that has already been signed by the Roman Catholic Church and the Lutheran World Federation. The Methodists, as we heard yesterday, have associated. The Anglican community has affirmed and welcomed the JDDJ, and we will celebrate this all together on July 5th. And it's an important signal of our ecumenical witness. We are really lifting up again the urgency and importance of the Reformed vocation to bring unity and not division, to ensure that we do not let reconcilable divisions divide us. We now want to bring the Reformation into the present tense and all these tensions of the present as a force for unity and common witness for the next 500 years, so they may be shaped by visible unity. It's been a long process since 1999, when the Roman Catholics and the Lutherans began the JDDJ process. It signed the JDDJ in a process they called From Conflict to Communion. And this process has been important for our family. The process of consultation demonstrated sufficient enthusiasm, agreement, and encouragement for the Executive Committee to agree to associate with the JDDJ. But at the same time, at least 2 members clearly expressed their dissent, and others expressed some unease. In the spirit of communion, those churches did not want to block the decision, but they did need to be assured that their dissent was heard, understood, made visible. And this we have, in the Executive Committee, resolved to do by making sure that that dissent is registered in the Executive Committee minutes where the decision was taken. And the experience has sharpened for us the complexities of life in a global communion, where what is seen as right and even imperative at a global level can cause tensions and unease in specific contexts. The JDDJ revealed both this tension, but it also revealed the grace that is given and displayed by not allowing divisions to divide us, and at the same time showing the need for differences to be acknowledged and respected. We've also heard about the Wittenberg Declaration, the moving together with the Lutherans in new commitment arising out of an ecumenical dialogue, and now looking for a way forward so that our communion, our churches of the Protestant Reformation, is stronger and that we bring real unity. When I was at the Lutheran World Federation's meeting, I challenged them, as had been mentioned in the dialogue report between Lutherans and Reformed, about the possibility of having even meetings like this, our general councils and assemblies together, and asked them the question, would it be possible that the next time we meet in assembly, they and us, we do it at the same time in the same place. In terms of ecumenical engagement, in this last number of years, we understand one thing about the World Communion of Reformed Churches, that in the most difficult spots in the world, our churches are present. And there is a global dimension to the pain and agony and dislocation of the war and violence, poverty, and ecological destruction that's being faced. And we as a methodology, both to accompany the churches, but to carry out our necessary role as a world communion, have been involved in some key situations where I'm pleased to report to you the situation is difficult, but we were able to be present with effective witness. One was the peace and reconciliation process on the Korean Peninsula, and I am pleased to recognize the presence here of the Korean Christian Federation, as well as representatives of the National Council of Churches, in addition to our own member churches, as the WCRC has played a special role, indicated also through our visit to North Korea in with members of the executive committee to meet with the KCF, immediately going back to South Korea and really emphasizing, lifting up, as the President of Germany said to us this morning, the special role of the Church in pressing for peaceful reconciliation and dialogue in highly charged contexts. We have been in some small way a bridge and a way forward, and pray that we can continue to be. Similarly, in the Colombia peace process, we have accompanied our member church there and have been very present in adding a global witness and support for those that try to move that difficult and troubled process forward. You can see on the screen members of our executive meeting with a representative of the FARC, a group that I'm pleased to say has now officially laid down their arms in order to move forward to the political building of common peace. We have been very concerned and active to support our churches in Syria, to be present and a force in Israel-Palestine, a situation where the unresolved situation of occupation and the long suffering must come to an end. However we stand in complicated political situations, we clearly must stand to witness for freedom and to overcome the pain and agony of displacement. Complicated issues, we hope to be present, transformative, and not forget the need for justice in the Middle East. And we are reinvigorated because our own churches are calling us to, also as in the situation in Syria. In Africa, there are many situations that we've been called to accompany. We are very conscious that some of the churches we had hoped would be here from South Sudan are not. Others have been able to come. We are going to be present and are planning pastoral visits to that very difficult situation and work strongly in all these situations that I mentioned with the World Council of Churches and others in working ecumenically, and we will continue to do that in the South Sudan situation as well as in Nigeria to accompany our churches there as they face many challenges, including religiously justified violence. We are reaching out and strengthening time and time again our relationship with other ecumenical organizations. And you will read in my report the roles that we try to play to strengthen the World Council of Churches and to give real meaning to the understanding that to be reformed is to be ecumenical. It can't be any other way. I mentioned earlier the important role of the executive and the officers in taking bold decisions, and want to really commend their work to you. And just at this point, I want to say that in the midst of talking about all the work we do, to lift up again, there is a full report and a list of all the staff people that has served us. But I want to take this moment to mention, as Jerry did, but just in my own accountability and appreciation, the work that has been done by staff, and to say what many people will of course know is about some of the staff transitions that were due to the move. And we have heard about the early retirement of Dr. Visser. We have given our great thanks, and I want to add my personal thanks to him, and a special thanks to Dora Arce, who is with us and working hard here, and to say again, to lift up our the staff that thank you. Now, isn't that a good president? We have a rather talented and important guy in our midst in the person of Phil Tanis, our communication director. We were so appreciative of thank you, Phil. including being clever to get a good picture of yourself there. Very good. And Christine Greenaway didn't make the move with us, the previous communication director, and we want to remind ourselves of how much we appreciated her leadership and help. The whole long list of that great group that helped us and didn't come this way from Geneva to Hanover, their names are there, and we will remember them with great appreciation. There's been other movements and changes in our midst, and we acknowledge the good help of Hans Lessing in this moment. We also will have I think just a strong appreciation of how you are being well served by the administrative staff. The work that Werner Jarker does, the work that Anna Kruger does, the work that Katrina Merz does, the work that Amrita does for us. There is just a boundless amount of commitment and energy. So thanks to those who have made my job even possible as staff. Please. It's been done formally, but I also want to say that in coming forward, just as we make a transition now, in the last part of my remarks, the General Council Planning Committee and particularly under the chairpersonship of Lisa van der Waal have been a model of working, and it is because of their strong vision that we're actually able to make the connection between what we were talking about, that this meeting isn't going to be simply a group of people meeting and having business items and moving through it. Remember our strategic goal, we're talking about being called to communion, committed to justice. How could it be then that this General Council meeting would not only work in an effective way, but the meeting itself would be a strong exercise in communion building and in witness for justice? Both of those things will happen in the meeting. We won't just talk about them. And the discernment model is part of that, and I want to give a special tribute to Lisa and the other members of her team who pressed us hard to make sure that the way we worked in this General Council was a communion building and a witnessing to justice moment. Thank you to that committee. Please. Read the reports of the past, study them, bring questions about them. But now where are we at? We moved, we got a fresh breath last year, said we didn't do all that we needed to do, but we're still called to go forward, and we feel this strong urge to offer our crying out of the depths to the living God and say, renew us and transform us, all of us, but us. The offering I'm making in my report is I mentioned before the three frameworks. And the first one, as we know and heard yesterday in terms of the exhibition that has been so excellently prepared, is the context of the 500 years of the Reformation. There is and Dr. Rache mentioned this today as well, there is a distinctive contribution as we think about what this 500 years and more than 500 years of Reformation for us. We have an unfinished agenda from the past, ongoing challenges and new ones coming. What does it mean to reflect in those contexts of the 500 years of the Reformation? And the President was particularly helpful in lifting up the distinctiveness that we need to embrace and enrich with our own diverse yet particular theological perspective as a WC family. And again, to use the image that I used in my report in earlier article in the introductory book that you were all sent, is the challenge, most simply put, out of all the reflection is to move the living Protestant tradition into the present tense. And as we said, that means to embrace, and the translators will probably go crazy in different languages here, embrace the tense present, or to make it easier, the tensions of the present age. Everything we think means bringing the resources of the Reformed theological and confessing tradition to the present questions, which means we need to listen to the suffering and cries of humanity. We need to feel and embrace and be pained by the suffering of all of creation. It means responding to the situations of our churches who live and witness in situations of injustice and oppression. It means all together listening and responding to the suffering, violence, and oppression at the global level of the whole Ecumene. The whole creation, Calvin tells us, is the theater of God's grace. This must lead us to embrace the imperatives and the approach of confessing moments, such as represented by the Barmen, Belhar, and Accra declarations and confessions. We say, as people standing in the present tense, our chief confessions could be summarized usually this way: the earth is the Lord and all that is in it. Some of my friends would say, can I get an amen? The earth is the Lord's and all that are in it. We are bold to say, Jesus is Lord. Now, can we act as if we mean it? Because the confessing moment in the present tense means that if we say that all of the world is the theater of God's grace, and there is no part that we could stand to say there are other idols of death and destruction, there are other masters that rule and dictate, that destroy human life, that destroy the planet, and we stand by and say we confess the God of life, and that is irrelevant to us, that God's creation is being destroyed, dismantled, and unmade. This is a special opportunity now for all of us to think, how do we bring those distinctiveness? What will it mean, sola scriptura? What does it mean to use the deep realities of the Word of God to call us into the witness, ministry, and mission that God calls us to do? What does it mean to live a life of faith? The Lutherans are inspiring. Salvation is not for sale, they say. Creation is not for sale. The grace of God means that we are free and not bound, but will we use that freedom as we pray to transform the world? So the Reformation tradition is a situation of understanding the tradition itself is a living process and moves us strongly and always into the present tense. The tensions of the present are with us. We also understand that we are embracing very strongly the tradition of communion in our present moment. So since 2010, and this is now the second point, our life as a communion together, we understand ourselves differently, not only a federation or a conference or a council or an alliance, but to be a koinonia. We heard much of these reflections in George Zacharias and other reflections about how we come together as an interconnected group, and we're not there yet. We need very seriously to understand that part of the situation is that altogether we must say that the business of our global witness and our identity as a family, reaching out to each other, accompanying churches in need, making a witness in faith that actually impacts right down to the congregational level, touches the lives of everybody, makes common cause with ecumenical partners, is all of our business. And we have stressed the importance for all member churches to be involved at all levels. It is a practical and theological imperative to build our communion and strengthen us. And we do it in a unique way. It must be a strengthening of this family that takes the diversity of our family seriously. There's no one way of being reformed. Our united and uniting traditions have to be honored. Their press for visible unity has to be taken seriously and lifted up. The Waldensian, Hussite, and many first Reformation traditions have to challenge us to new ways of thinking. But in that great diversity, we have to build a strong sense of a communion that in its turn is building the whole ecumenical family and strengthening it. So we understand in that one challenge. We said regional empowerment, having our regions be strong, is so important. We're a long way from being where we need to be. Our future must embrace our regions and work hard, so that there is a dynamic interplay always and in every way. There is stress and difficulties also, as many of our churches no longer find themselves in easy economic situations. Not only churches that traditionally have had economic struggles, but many of our other larger churches, even in the global north, face dwindling numbers and increased composition for scarce resources. We are one of the smallest communions in this family of world communions in terms of staff resources and a global office presence. We wanted it to be that way, but at the same time, in being that way, we need to acknowledge that there is basic sustainability, things we must do to make this powerful witness we're called to, and we are also not there yet. The financial sustainability of the organization of this family is the business of all of us, and it must be. We are so thankful for the partners and others that have helped us make our budgets year after year, but we need to work stronger and more deeply in order to build our communion. I mentioned earlier that this sustainability must be all of our responsibilities. It is a major challenge. We have to think about it and go about it in different ways. We have dealt with the question of the breaking of relationships over questions of sexuality, over questions of ordination of women. We must attend to our differences and believe strongly with the leadership of the Holy Spirit, guided by a powerful theological reflection and reading the scriptures together, that we will not allow ourselves to be divided. Neither will we make easy compromises about our core beliefs, about justice, and about communion. We must find spaces to hold ourselves together without losing the core of the mission that God calls us to. We can move forward if we attend to our life in a communion. The last moments of the reflection are going to be bridged by reminding ourselves again of the age that we live in, the moment. The question of this very broken reality, and we're going to hear about it all the time because we live about it all the time. What some people call even a civilizational change, a calling into question all the things that we have been the Accra Confession in 2004 talked about the scandalous state of the world. We've heard it repeated time and time again. The situation that we're in and the brokenness and the division, the violence, many of the cultural unmakings, human solidarity being cast aside. And in all of this, I have characterized it biblically and theologically as a question of a world fallen among thieves. An image that Jesus used in John 10:10. An image of the Good Shepherd attending to the gift of life, but others who come to destroy. We're not personalizing that to people, but systems. Systems that must be addressed. I was inspired in my reading in addressing the realities of this world by the recent book by Canadian author and activist Naomi Klein. Her new book is called, interestingly enough, No is Not Enough. And it did a couple of things important to help me understand. One is that she put forward a clear analysis of why it was that so many of the people in the world are embracing regimes and governments and policies that so clearly do not speak to their own interests, where the hungry are not fed, where people don't get education, where the very, very few profit at the expense of the very, very many. What's going on? And she talks about the idea that we allow destructive systems because others, for their own interest, use times of shock and crisis to impose on justice and oppressive policies that people are simply too disoriented by shock to resist. And she says we need a firm grasp of how these politics work and whose interests they serve to get out of the shock and start, as she calls it, fighting back. But what's interesting is when she talks about why we're in this bad spot, and it's being clear, now this is a voice coming from an activist, from the secular society, saying we have to do something else. We have to not just denounce the system, we have to start telling a different story from the one the shock doctors, she says, are peddling. A vision of the world compelling enough to go head to head with the idea that we have to accept austerity, that we have to accept that 8 men in the world own as much wealth as 1/2 of the entire planet. We need to offer a different path, away from serial shocks and crises, based on a coming together, this path would be, across racial, ethnic, religious, and gender divides. And rather than being wrenched further apart, a path that's based on healing the planet rather than unleashing further destabilizing wars and pollution. Most of all, that vision, she argues, has to offer something to those people who are hurting for lack of jobs, lack of peace, lack of health care, lack of hope, lack of food, to offer to them a tangibly better life. No one would think that Klein, a secular activist, is reading directly from the prophets or the Gospels, but her sources are life experience and leadership that comes from a certain place. It comes from the experience of people who are brutalized by the system. And it points out to something rather obvious, that she is pointing to the very thing to which the Bible points. She points to groups in the United States collaborating together. She points to groups around the world gathering together to say we can begin to see the outlines from people that are pushing back and defending their lives of a majority grounded in a bold plan for a safe and caring world, the world we all want. Now, at this point, Klein is unwittingly picking up the very theme of the new mission statement of the World Council of Churches, Together Towards Life. In that statement, it talks about mission from the margins. Margins not being geographic places only, but those places where there isn't power and privilege. It is from that place, not only does mission have to happen, it emerges from that place. Again, the story of the poor evangelizing the church, the least favored leading the most favored in God's will. She says we have to resist the attacks of the present day, but find space to build the future we need. This is so close to the theological method we see in confessions, where we affirm the vision we want, reject the systems that destroy it, confess the God that can get us there. She reverses the order, though, and says the firmness of our no's has to be accompanied by a bold yes. Yes, she says, is the beacon in the coming storms that will prevent us from losing our way. Klein is calling us to overcome division for the sake of transformation. How about us? Can we meet Klein's test? Yes to the God of life, so all can have life and have it abundantly, says John 10:10. Yes, we do know what the Lord requires of us, Micah 6:8. As a vital and diverse communion with common roots and common vision, but with significant differences, we gather here in Leipzig to assess the last 7 years, yes, take stock of the present tense, and plead to the living God to stare the future both threatening and promising and hopeful in the face. So these are our three urgent contexts. We need to know that Klein, in calling for this yes, sounds that a challenge to our no's. We say no to many things, but for many in our Accra, Barman, Accra, and Belhar confessions, our yes isn't yet clear. It's not clear enough in any case. Emerging from our confession to the living God through the power of the Holy Spirit, we are called to embrace a bold yes to life, to live out and give voice to the compelling values-based vision that creates a real plan that lifts up those crushed by the forces of destruction. We will not be able to rest on religious slogans, pious hopes, or righteous proclamation. We need to offer a real plan against the great unmaking. We humbly seek the renewal and transformation needed to respond through the leading of the Spirit, through God's grace, in discipleship to Jesus Christ as a vision. Challenged, as Habakkuk 2:2 says, to make plain the vision. We know it's about doing justice, loving kindness, and walking humbly with God. We are clear, as Psalm 85 says, when we turn to God, God speaks peace, and then peace and justice embrace. Isaiah 58 is clear that if we stand with the hungry, poor, and afflicted, we will be called repairers of the breach, restorers of streets to live in. Jesus is clear in his yes is God's mission to the power of the Spirit lifted up in Luke 4:16. Yes, good news to the poor. Yes, liberty to the captives. Yes, sight to the blind. Liberation to the oppressed. Yes, to the year of Jubilee, so the people and the earth may be free and live. But Jesus is even plainer in Matthew 25. Our yes must be a path that's centered on the least favored, the hungry, the naked, the homeless, the refugee, the prisoner, the stranger. For her part, Klein is honest in saying she doesn't exactly know what this yes looks like or what the path is. But she says something that is a good guide to us. She doesn't know what the plan is, but she says effectively, I know that it will emerge collaboratively. I know who the architects and artisans of this plan are and and where the path will be discerned. Klein is in strong resonance with the Jubilee prophetic tradition of Jesus. She is moving in the same direction, as I mentioned, as the Together to Life mission document. It is clear how God works, who God is using to construct what Klein has called the bold plan for the safe and caring world we want. With God's leading, we must make this path together. The how is clear. To be brief, we must work in all things collaboratively, with other people, with other faiths, with other communions, in our own context, with other churches, and in and among ourselves. To make a strong yes, koinonia, the bringing together in intimate relationship, must be part of our yes. A long way to go, therefore, with our regions. Our yes must mean that we look differently than we look today. I've lifted a whole line of challenges, and those challenges will include turning ourselves around in transformation so that our yes is an embodiment of overcoming the fact that we still internalize and display relationships that are not in our churches and in our lives that are not equal between men and women, where age over youth is still dominant, where black over white, people of color are in a different place than people with the privilege that look like me and that have the privilege of position and power. We need
Chris, I'm going to give you 3 more minutes to round up.
Thank you. We need, I'll just go in there, thank you very much. This means to bring our diverse but distinctive Reformation traditions into the present tense. In the current world context and local context as a communing family. This would include strategies and resources that we will draw together. I commend the pages of the report to you because this renewal and transformation that we are promised will come from working collaboratively with others. We will be led by those who are the least favored. And we turn to God and pray for this humble opportunity to deepen our communion, to strengthen our call to justice, and to seek transformation and renewal for the transformation of the world. My report, Mr. President.
Thank you, General Secretary. I'm wanting to finish quite promptly at 1:30 because I know we've had a long morning and people are quite hungry by now. So we have about 20 minutes. Firstly, let's receive the report. Somebody to second that we receive the report of the General Secretary. Please, technicians, yes, can you put lights on this? I just want to see more light, please, if you can put lights on my left-hand side. Light, no dark. All right, somebody to second the report, please. Been received. Thank you very much. We have a time now for discussion. If there's any questions or comments that you'd like to offer, we have microphones placed up, one microphone on this side and a microphone there, I see. I think there should be a third microphone somewhere, I'm not quite sure where. If anybody wishes to speak, please come to the microphones. Microphone number 1, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Jan Heteks from the Protestant Church in the Netherlands. Chris, thank you for your report. Thank you for all your work and for the work of the staff. Yesterday in the report of the President, in the discussion after the report, and today came back that the theme of human sexuality is dividing our communion. And that there are different thoughts about it, and that is not easy for our communion. It's true, and I don't want to say that there is that we have a way out. But I think what is very necessary to be said, and what is not said, that it is not just a problem for us, it is people living with a human sexuality which is not accepted in their societies, and they are violated and discriminated. And I think with all our differences we have, we need a clear voice that violation of discrimination of people who live their human sexuality in another way than others accept it, that it is impossible for churches to accept. And that we in our countries and as a communion need to raise our voice against violation and discrimination of people who live their human sexuality in a way which is not accepted by the majority of the societies. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take 1 or 2 more questions and then we'll speak. Please, when you are speaking, I invite you to state your name, the church you're coming from, and the language that you would use. I invite the person on microphone number 4 to speak.
Ann Wyrick from the PC USA. Microphone 4, I'm sorry. I mean 2?
Yes, please go ahead.
Ann Wyrick from the Presbyterian Church USA, and I'll be speaking in English.
Thank you.
In Grand Rapids, I was part of the hosting community, and there we organized a welcome from the indigenous community. And at the opening ceremony, there was an exchange of gifts. The communion gave the Native American community a sword that had been beaten into a plowshare. That sword was taken around to various tribal meetings in the Midwest. And then you received a medal that had been given to the family of Mike Peters, an Odawa Indian, back in the 1800s. And my understanding was that that symbol was to travel. My question is that symbol, is that metal here? And I'm guessing that because of all the transition, there wasn't a time to focus on indigenous issues as was committed to at that meeting, but I would really like to know what the commitment to the indigenous issues is in the future.
Thank you. All right, I see the person from microphone number 2 has gone to take a seat. I don't see anybody else. Yes, is that still now? Yes, please go ahead. Please, can the technicians give me some light in the back? I cannot see in the back. Please go ahead, I see you.
Me?
It's microphone number 4.
Okay. Catherine Macmillan. I'm from the Swiss Reformed churches. I want to say something about the move from Geneva. I just wanted to say, that's not the main thing. The main thing is about the Reformation. That I'm sorry that Switzerland is so expensive. So we can't do much about that, but I wanted someone from the Swiss delegation to express appreciation to everyone who chipped in, especially to the Germans, so that this organization could continue running. And it might be an opportunity to take our roots, well, maybe to take the spotlight a little bit off of Geneva and Calvin and go back a few years to Zwingli, because he was a generation before, and actually most of the ideas that Calvin developed started with Zwingli. And some of those things have a lot to do with what we're talking about here, and I just wanted to take 2 minutes to point some of those things out. Zwingli was the one who made a sharp distinction between worshiping God and idolatry. And people know that he took art out of the church, but many don't know that he said that the poor people are the true images of God. And that's why we don't need these works of art in the church, and we shouldn't be spending money on them, but rather spending money on helping the poor. And he didn't just help the poor, but he was one of the first to look at structural sin. He looked at the root causes of poverty and started up the first welfare system in Zurich worldwide. It wasn't just handing out food, it was also doing job training. And he said that serving God is something you do in your everyday lives, and that you worship God by doing justice. And that the good news is not just something for salvation when we've died, but that it's also for justice in our lives here and now and in society. So I think those are important things.
Could you please round up?
I'm wrapping it up to say that under number 43, when you list Calvin, Knox, and Zwingli, you might change it around and say Zwingli, Calvin, Bullinger, and Knox. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Thank you very much. I first of all want to thank Chris for his report. I'm Lydia Adajawa from Ghana. In your report, you talked about visas, and you talked about the youth who have been given the opportunity to attend the general councils. But unfortunately, many of the youth and many of the delegates from Africa were denied visas. It happened in 2010 in Grand Rapids, and it's happened again. It did not happen in 2004 in Ghana. So we want to find out, I know you did a lot, but what else do we need to do so that these young people and other delegates from Africa are not denied visas any longer. Thank you.
Thank you. There's been 5 speakers, and I just want to give the General Secretary an opportunity to respond to those.
Yes, remember to push the button. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks, Jan Gert, for our question. I think in the clarity I think that we have around the question of sexuality and what I have mentioned, and we need to go deep into it, is that the fundamental stance that we have, I believe, as a Reformed family, as we have differences theologically and understanding about human sexuality, I understand that we are joined together by the common purposes and understanding the mission of God, where the questions of justice and respect for human dignity and defense of the life and integrity of all people is not discussable, and that all human beings are made in God's image and must be defended and protected by us. And in that sense, what Jan Gert is saying is absolutely so, and that although we, under the theme of communion, are talking about how to deal with our differences, there is a whole other series of questions which we have to continue accompany our churches in the and as a community as a whole, in the vigorous defense of all people, including the LGBTI community, when their lives are in danger and dignity is imperiled. And that has to be imperative for us, even in the face of differences, theological understandings about homosexuality. In terms of the question of the indigenous people, I think one of the great I wasn't part of the executive for all those years, but I would say, as far as I know, the symbol that you mentioned is not with us, and it's never been shared with me for keeping. But I recognize, and at several of the executive meetings, it's clear that among others, but including the Indigenous person from Canada, the First Nations woman that's on our executive, has continually lifted up and lamented the way in which we have failed to keep our commitments in terms of solidarity and walking with Indigenous people. And it definitely is, and also mentioned in my report in the written version, as a strong imperative that we have not risen to. In terms of the apology for being too expensive, Catherine, we thank you. The focus on the very rich traditions of the Reformation, we need to make those present and bring forward, and particularly as we are drawing on the distinctive things to say, particularly the voice also of the women of the Reformation that need to be foregrounded and underlined. Lydia, I mentioned yesterday the question of the visas when we opened the session. We'll continue to mention it. It was mentioned in the prayers today. The profiling is clear of what countries and which youth are affected, and we are going to continue to take this up at a higher level. It's a brokenness in our midst. Our fellowship is incomplete, and there are justice issues as well as practical issues to be pursued.
Thank you. I see 3 more speakers at microphones. Microphone number 1.
Terima kasih. Saya Pendeta Julian Widodo dari Gereja Masehi Injili di Timor, Indonesia. Saya akan berbicara menggunakan bahasa Indonesia. Terima kasih Tuan Ferguson untuk laporan Anda. Saya ingin menyampaikan pikiran saya seperti ini. Pengakuan Akra mengajarkan kita bahwa Allah memanggil kita untuk mendengar ratap tangis kaum miskin. Dalam konteks ini, kami di Indonesia, bahkan negara-negara lain di Asia Tenggara, kami masih banyak yang hidup dalam kemiskinan. Dan salah satu penyebab dari kemiskinan itu karena negara-negara kami banyak yang belum bisa melunasi hutang luar negerinya. terkait dengan itu, kira-kira apa yang dapat dilakukan oleh gereja-gereja reformasi dalam hal ini yang menjadi anggota gereja WCRC dapat mempengaruhi negara-negara kaya di mana kami berhutang kepada mereka, sehingga tahun Yobel itu dapat kami nikmati di negara kami, sehingga pembebasan dari hutang-hutang itu dapat terjadi. Tentu saya tidak berbicara dengan maksud untuk supaya kami dibebaskan segera dari hutang-hutang itu, tetapi paling tidak melalui WCRC, negara-negara yang mana kami berhutang itu kiranya dapat mempertimbangkan cara untuk membebaskan kami, memberi kami tahun rahmat untuk terbebas dari hutang-hutang kami. Mohon komentar dari Tuan Ferguson. Terima kasih.
I just want to advise the speakers you have 2 minutes. After 1 minute, a bell will be sounded. Please be mindful of that, which means you've got another minute to round up. Microphone number 2.
Mr. President, thank you. Hannah North from Presbyterian Church of Aotearoa, New Zealand. I will be speaking in English. My question is about communion and the Ecumenical Church. I see we are making an effort with the Roman Catholic Church, and my question is, are we, as the World Communion of Reformed Churches, doing anything to build communion with the Orthodox Church as well, keeping in mind that the split was between the Catholic Church years and years ago? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I see there is somebody at microphone number 3. Would you please introduce yourself and speak?
Thank you. My name is Sri Ulina Ginting from GBKP Indonesia. I will speak in English. I have 3 remarks. The first is I'm thanking the General Secretary and the office. It will be a hard work moving from Switzerland to Germany. So we're thanking you for that. The second part, as you address on your paper, you are making a lot of work in young people, and as we are coming here today, 4 of our young delegates becoming a stewards in this council, and we're thanking you as well for giving our church chances to participate, and young people are really appreciated to be in here, and 1 young delegate as well. And the third is that as the president, when we are in the church address, that religion is misused as a means of isolation and distance. This is also going on in our country now, that religion is being misused. And I would like to address this, what you were mentioning in the beginning, that what stances are we taking when this is happening in our country, that really religion is being used. This is really a bad part in our country, and this causes injustice. So what do we do in this context? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going back to microphone number 2. And microphone number 1 will be the last speaker.
Trevor Gribben from the Presbyterian Church in Ireland, speaking in English. Can I thank the General Secretary for his report? I want to refer to the association with JDDJ. Could I ask, firstly, we were told yesterday there are 233 churches in the Communion. How many of those churches positively assented to association with JDDJ? Secondly, whilst recognising the authority of the Executive Committee to take the actual decision to associate and not wishing to frustrate that in any way, could I ask how member churches at this meeting can register the dissent in the minutes of this meeting, and particularly does procedure 13 in the Rule of Procedures apply?
Microphone number 1.
Thank you. My name is Charles Jongo from South Sudan. I just want to remind that emphasizing that the African Union Church of South Sudan is present.
Yes.
Is present here. So the point just I want to again talk about is the issue of South Sudan. I've just heard the General Secretary saying something about it. I want to emphasize that that is very important, and I appreciate it very much. And I want to say the problem of South Sudan is very important. The issue of South Sudan is so important. I want to emphasize that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll ask the General Secretary to give brief responses to these questions and comments.
Yes, I'm sorry my headphones weren't working for all the first question. If the question about the difficulties with debts, I mean, in terms of the, I need to, I guess, ask the speaker if the question was about member churches and debts to WCRC, or whether it was the larger question. In either case, I want to say just quickly that we're working very strongly on within our family in the question of dialoguing with any churches that find it difficult to pay the fees, and trying to bring forward and resolve those things. And people will know that there have been many different solutions when we're in contact. The important thing is if there are churches that are struggling to be in contact and to negotiate and dialogue, as we are trying to build our fellowship in a way that respects. In terms of understanding all our struggles in a larger economic way, we of course are also working on larger issues of economic justice and finding the struggles of the individual church also to be met by the larger struggles for justice in the economy. The ecumenical patriarchate of the ecumenical patriarchate, the Orthodox Church of the Greek Orthodox Church, is together with us reaching out to discuss ways in which we can reinitiate. There have been ecumenical dialogues with WARC in the past with the Orthodox community, and there is mutual conversations about reinitiating dialogues, particularly with the Greek Orthodox Church, to build a common sense of community. And on the third point about the misuse of religion and addressing difficult situations of injustice, we are involved on several levels. On a global level, with a large process with the Global Christian Forum, and we will maybe hear some of that work talked about, where all Christian churches together are trying to accompany and understand how to be present in those situations. Their situations are contextual, one by one, and we try to accompany member churches and find out what is constructive and wanted from us. And we are also having a consultation process called Mission in the Front Lines, where we will bring churches together, again, to analyze their own situation, to try and strengthen and accompany them to address these questions. We do understand it to be a priority issue. And thanking Trevor for his question. As I think we mentioned, there was a long process of consultation over a period of years. The actual letter that was sent out by the executive committee testing their own discernment about moving forward got, and I think this is maybe Trevor's point, out of our 233 member churches, there was 24 responses that were positive, as I understand it, and out of those, and so that sounds like a small number. The process, of course, wasn't a vote, but it was a testing, and that was the disease I revert to as how the executive committee discerned, but with the large process of dialogue, the decision was taken to move ahead. And in terms of the minutes of this meeting, certainly if the dissent of those that would like to have dissent registered could be passed to the business committee, and dissent could be registered. would be registered when passed. Yes, sorry, I meant to say, and I said too quickly at the end, that there were South Sudanese churches here, only lamenting that not all the churches from South Sudan that had aspired to come are here. So very happy with those that have that have been here, and really also have continually, with the World Council of Churches, to want to uphold the churches in South Sudan in our prayers, both the humanitarian, the political, and the war context, and keep it as a priority before us to accompany those churches and look for solutions to the deeper problems that are afflicting the people of South Sudan. So thank you for lifting that up. Yeah. Or just say the issues in the report. Yeah.
We have a further proposal to put to the Council.
Yes, that the issues raised, and particularly the questions for further vision in the last section of the report, be referred to the Vision and Message Committee for consideration and action.
Someone to second that for us? Thank you very much. Those in favor, please indicate. The report be sent to the Vision and Message Committee. Thank you. Those against? Okay, it is carried. We come to the end of this particular session. We now break for lunch, and we will start promptly again at 3 o'clock. So please try and find your way back here just before then so we can start on time. Let us stand for prayer. Lord, we thank you for the way you have been with us in a busy morning and for all the things that we have accomplished thus far. And now as we take time to rest and to nourish ourselves, we ask that you will bless us, bless the food that is prepared, and bless those who have prepared it for us. Be with us now as we continue to fellowship and enjoy this time together. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch. Thanks, Chris.
I didn't feel very successful.